changing the agenda, because now we are talking about the dating market. Yes, you've heard right. You're not going on a date, but it's the theme for today. We're having a person on stage that is a front runner of the second biggest dating app in Denmark, and it's going into the market in Sweden and Norway as well. They're going to talk about how data help this startup go into the market and what is the secret about us. So please welcome to the stage from Doubble, Ingmar A.N. Please join me on stage. Yeah. The stage is yours.
Thank you. And hello. My name is Ingmar. I am the co-founder and CGO of a small Danish company called Doubble. This is a picture of me on my way by bicycle through Africa to Cape Town. Just thought it was fun to bring it up. I have a background as a trained economist, and then I also worked a few years at BCG, an American management consultancy, before I joined my two co-founders, Dennis and Matthias, in building Doubble. At Doubble, I am the sort of guy in charge of data, algorithms, and growth and business, and the sort of more boring stuff of having a startup as well. I will sort of in this very brief period go a bit through what is Doubble. We're of course a company. I'm not sure everyone has heard of us. Secondly, I'll talk about why matchmaking as a sort of thing in itself is quite difficult and why that is. I'll go through quite a lot of data on sort of matchmaking and the behavior in the dating sort of space of people. And then I'll talk briefly about what the principles then are to make a matchmaking algorithm to make sure people actually have a good experience using something like a dating app like ours. But before, I guess, we go into that, I would love to hear whether any of you guys have actually ever used a dating app. I practiced saying that at least some of you are lying if no one raised their hands. So that's quite good to see. Does anyone have any fun experiences they want to share with a dating app? Or sort of whether was it a good experience? Just raise your hands if you liked it. Sort of in between. I think that answer, that response is quite common, and that is perhaps the main reason why this data I'm about to show you is going to be sort of, at least there's some data behind why it's so difficult to get a good experience on a dating app. Regardless, while I'm talking, please just interrupt me if there are any questions. It's not a super formal presentation, and I'm generally not a super formal person. So I'd much prefer that if any of you guys have any fun questions, please do sort of shout out. But first, what is Doubble? We are sort of relatively young team, and we generally see ourselves representing a generation that spends the most time on sort of digital products that were meant to connect us. But at the same time, young people, and myself included, find ourselves sometimes feeling rather lonely and always competing for likes, followers, attention on any of the big sort of social media platforms out there. Arguably, we see sort of two spaces. You have the traditional dating space that has sort of a feeling like going to a bar and trying to hook up with strangers. And then on the other hand, you will have traditional social media, which would be, say, Instagram, Facebook, whatever, that sometimes give the feeling of going into a nightclub completely alone and just trying to, whatever, have fun and meet friends. And we are trying to create a product that is somewhere in the middle, that's going to feel a bit more like going to a dinner with some people you like and some good friends of yours. So we made Doubble because essentially we see that all the dating apps that are out there are all the same. And they all have the same issues. Some of them I'll get into with the data itself when I'm going to start showing you some numbers in a second. And they're going to speak into why a lot of people have bad experiences using dating apps. One of them, though, being that I'm not going to talk much about is safety. On a traditional dating app, of course, you go out and you meet a complete stranger, entirely on your own, something that can feel, say, awkward, but to some people also feel somewhat unsafe and dangerous. So Doubble is in essence a social concept. The way the app works is that you sign up like any other app, I guess, but then before you start swiping on people, you add your friends. And then once you match with a person, then you cannot communicate, you can actually do nothing until one of your friends also matches with one of that person's friends. And then we hook all 4 of you into a group chat. And so the whole idea of this is to create a hard social constraint on matching. That means that you can essentially only go out with people if you're 4 people doing it. And that means that you will always bring your own friend, which gives you a layer of safety. But that other person also always brings their own friend, and that in that regard, you're all sort of in the safest possible environment to meet people. That's at least our argument. And that is also what our customers would tell us. So we have plus 100,000 users. We are a year and a half into our journey. We launched Denmark in November 21. We launched Sweden in this early spring. We launched Norway about a month and a half ago. And we launched the Netherlands a week ago. And currently we're number 3, I think, in the Dutch App Store after 7 days on the market. And we'll be launching Belgium in 1 week's time. So far it's going super well. And we're extremely proud of that. But with that, I think you guys are here for some tech talking. And I'm a bit of a data geek. Some would call me a data freak, so I'll go quite into a lot of detail on some numbers. And I'll show quite a few somewhat complex heat maps and charts and stuff like that. I would urge you to please not take pictures, because this data is actually sort of our own. It's from our own databases. And we generally like to keep our data quite close. But please, if it doesn't make sense, again, raise your hand, say something, or just yell. That's entirely fine with me. But firstly, sort of, what is the job of a dating app? The job of a dating app is, of course, matchmaking. And matchmaking is extremely hard. And maybe just the first numbers I'll sort of show to explain why that is that, in essence, our male profiles, if you have not used a dating app, in general, and it's the same in Doubble, the way it works is you see a person in front of you on your phone, generally, and then you can sort of swipe yes or no, so you can say yes or no to that person. And then we operate on the side a double blind, so if you say yes to that person and that other person also says yes to you, well, then it's a match. If not, then no one will ever know, and that's it. Our male users, they will swipe yes on 60% of the profiles they see. Does anyone have a guess what the number is then for women the other way around? 20. That's actually a pretty good guess. The number is 14, right? So already here on the very, very high level or early scale, and I know I'm being somewhat heteronormative. Of course, not all of our users are males interested in females and women interested in men. We also do have all sorts of other sexualities and genders, but 90-something% of our users are heterosexual men and women. So most of this presentation will sort of be about them. But non-binaries are, interestingly enough, somewhere in between men and women on this scale. But this, of course, already gives a bit of an issue, because you will have men sending about 4 times as many likes into the world as the women. And so already here, if you've ever had a sort of semi-bad experience with a dating app, well, if you are a man, you'll have the feeling that you're sort of liking everyone and you never get a match. And if you're a woman, you'll have the feeling that whatever you do, you always get a match, and like you get bombarded with messages from all sorts of men that you're maybe not that interested in anyways. And this is why matchmaking and algorithms are quite important in this industry, and why this is a pretty difficult task sort of overcome. It gets even harder on the big scale, because on every single traditional dating app, you'll have far more men on there than you'll have women. So I just took up here 4 of the largest dating apps, or well, 3 of the largest dating apps in the world, and then us, we're the largest in a few countries, but not all over the world. Bumble, Hinge, Tinder. Tinder, I think, is the most famous dating app, and it was sort of the first one creating a dating app in the style every dating app is today. They are about 4-to-1 men to women. And if you then take the 4 times as many likes sent, then you get to 16 times more likes going from men to women than the other way around, which makes it a super difficult task to hook up people in sort of a fun way. But that's only sort of scratching the surface, because that's sort of very high level numbers on likes and dislikes. If you then dive one step deeper, and bear with me, this looks confusing. On, say, the y-axis here of this table, we have the age of the person sending the like. Then on the x-axis, I've sort of plotted the age of the person receiving the like. So if we just take the top row up here in the top column, or the first column, I am an 18-year-old woman sending a like to an 18-year-old person I see. And as you can see, these numbers are all for women. Women generally, the older they get, they will also send the most likes to people of their same age. And that is sort of a very natural, if you will, or a very logical way of seeing it. So when I'm 18 years old, my favorite person to swipe on is a 19-year-old. When I'm 19 years old, my favorite person to swipe on is another 19-year-old. When I'm 20, it's 20, and then sort of so forth. So the older I get, the older people I like. Does anyone, and I'd love to hear you just yell out loud, does anyone have a guess of how this looks on the next slide when it comes to men? Yell it. Yes, younger. That is actually sort of very, very high level. That is the correct answer. The older you get as a man, the more you just like 20-year-olds. Regardless of sort of how old you are, it's always just going to be more 20-year-olds. And if anything, the ratio of how many of them you like actually increases. So when I'm 18 years old, I will like 62% of the other 18-year-olds I see. But when I'm 37, I'll like 95% of the 18-year-olds I see, right? And sort of the magic of dating numbers is that even when you just take at the very face of it, men will send far more likes than women do. But when you then dive into the numbers, men's likes will also be extremely skewed to one side, which is younger people. And so again, this makes it very, very difficult for us as a task or as a company to try to hook up people in a way that makes sense for them. Now I'm going to scratch a slight level deeper into sort of the world of dating. To hook up people or to show people relevant profiles, we try our best to sort of find someone that are likely to like you back when you send a swipe. And based upon this, we have sort of a rank, or I've at least made it for this purpose, a rank of the like to swipe ratio. Bear with me, it essentially just means how big a share of the people who saw my profile sent me a like and how many sent me a dislike. If we take that for all of our few 100,000 users and rank them from 1 being the person who receives the most likes as a percentage of the likes they sent, or the likes they received, sorry, and 100 being the people who receive the least, so essentially the least popular of our users. If we then see how many likes do these people then send back into the system, well then the least popular people, so the ones that the fewest like, they will send the most likes out. I guess this is somewhat obvious, but this again makes it very, very difficult because everyone, and this is where the next slide comes in, everyone will send a like to the most popular person, but that person will send very few likes back, and then the other way around, very few people will send likes to this person, or these people, but they will send all sorts of likes into the world. And that again means a lot of the experience of using a dating app can become quite difficult because if I'm this guy, or girl, I'm sending a ton of likes into the system. I'm liking practically everyone, but I'm receiving practically no likes back. Again, data and algorithms are the only way to try to overcome this issue of putting people together in a way that sort of makes them happy and that makes sense to them. And this is where sort of algos come in handy. We are being a very small startup with a sort of, we are the only ones in the world doing matchmaking the way we are and having this sort of double match idea. So I will not go into details on how our algorithm works, but I'll try to explain what are sort of the principles of a matchmaking algorithm. And then you can shoot any questions at me if you have any. In essence, the way we see it, there are sort of three main goals or principles in a matchmaking algorithm. The first one, and the first two ones are essentially benefiting the user, and the last one is essentially benefiting us as a company or the network as a whole. So firstly, of course, you want to show relevant users. And by that, I mean someone that I am likely to give a swipe to. That would be the sort of optimal. I would give a like to, right? So you want to show me the person that I'm the most likely to find attractive or find interesting. Secondly, of course, you want to give people matches. So if I only find the ones that I will find attractive, we could just always show me the best looking profiles, or say the ones with the highest ratio of likes to dislikes. They're the most popular ones, so I'm likely to also engage with them. Problem is, there's a chance they didn't like me back, right? Because I'm not, I can tell you, and in the first percentile there. So the second target is, of course, to give you matches somehow. And that is trying to categorize our users in terms of how many did send you a like and so forth. And then the final sort of task or thing we're trying to achieve with our algorithm is to benefit the network as a whole. And what do I mean when I say that? I mean that we are trying our best to get you as a user to swipe as much as possible. Because if we do the first two tasks perfectly, then you will see the user you like the most, the first, and that user has already liked you, so you'll get a match, and then you're sort of done swiping, then you're happy. Maybe we do this 3-4 times, you get 3-4 matches on the 3-4 first swipes you give, and that's it, then we're done. But what then happens to the next 100 or 200 users who get into the app? No one has sent them a swipe or a like yet. So there's a sort of eternal balance in trying to also get our users to send as much content, if you will, but as many likes into the system, even though they will not give them matches immediately because that other person maybe hasn't seen them yet, or even though they might not even be so relevant for this one person, so that everyone in our small world of dating already has some likes on them, so they can also get this feeling of seeing relevant users and getting matches. I hope what I'm saying makes sense. But this sort of balance or this weight can sometimes be a relatively difficult task. And it can also come with a few moral implications. Because in essence, we're trying, to some extent, to make our users addicted to swiping, right? We want to get them to swipe more, not in our interest, but in the interest of the whole system, of the other users on the app. And so, with this in mind, we can try to build an algorithm. And without sort of going too much into detail in what algorithms are and how ours work, an algorithm is essentially some math trying to achieve either categorization or, say, ranking of something, right? It could be anything, but a linear regression is an algorithm, right? Or at least you achieve linear regression using algorithms. So what I'll just quickly go through here and this is my sort of final slide, and then I'd love to hear if you have any questions, is sort of the parameters that we then put into our algorithm. And I guess you could come up with a ton more in terms of trying to get people then to see the most relevant content, the most relevant users, and to get as many likes. So one being, of course, did the person that I'm seeing already send a like back to me? That would be a very good thing for me, right? That makes that person super relevant for me. And with Doubble, of course, seeing that we can only hook up people when we're in groups of 4, we actually have a layer even deeper, which is did their friend also already like my friend, and did my friend already also like their friend? So there's already a level of complexity here that I'm not going to dive too much into. Then secondly, well, there's the question of how often should we give the user a match? So say that I'm on the app and 100 people have already liked me. Do we then want to show the 100 people immediately No, because that would then mean that I don't send enough likes back into the system. So how often do we even want to give our users matches? So thirdly, how popular is the user? So and by popular I just mean how sort of popular are they on the platform, how many likes and dislikes do they receive? How active is the user? So we prefer to show people that have been recently active somehow, because then, well, the chances are you'll start a chat and you'll go have fun and you'll actually enjoy the experience of using the app. So the more active, the better. And then, how did similar people swipe on this user? So we're also trying, in our algo at least, to use the behavior of other people who have similar behavior to me to predict whether I will like the person I see, and then show me only the most relevant ones. 6, so what are the user characteristics? So in our app, you can sort of put in what are my favorite holiday types. I can go hiking or swimming, whatever. We could also match people up based on these things. 7th, how picky is the user? So in some dating apps, they will try to penalize you for being too, say, swipe happy, or like happy, if you will. So if you send too many likes, well, you'll get, say, degraded in the app. That is also a way forward, and that's also a parameter you can put into the algo. How far away is the user? An obvious parameter in a dating app. People generally don't like people that are close to themselves or sort of too far away from themselves, because they want to meet up in real life. And then 9th, of course, very simple, is the user within the age range. So on our app, and I guess on most other dating apps, you can sort of select how old are the people I want to see. I want to see people between, I don't know, 25 and 35. Well, we, of course, only want to show people that are within the same age range. And then you could come up with a ton of other, essentially, parameters to put into the algo in a dating app or a matchmaking algo. But these are sort of the main ones. And as you can, maybe you don't agree with me, but some of these can be somewhat controversial, right? For instance, how popular is the user? Or how did similar people swipe on this user? Essentially, we are predetermining some outcomes for people based upon simple data. And maybe there was some true love to be found by showing another set of users to each other than we decided to do. But that is sort of the eternal balancing of a matchmaking algo that we are trying every single day to make us as good as we possibly can in Doubble. And with that, if there are I would love to hear any questions. But maybe before that, I'll just give you a piece of advice on the way out. Another heat map from my end, which is essentially showing, and all these percentages are, again, how many likes do I send versus how many dislikes do I send. And you have the weekdays on one axis, and you have the hour of the day on the other. And perhaps very, very straightforward, if you want to find love, do so very late at night between Saturday and Sunday, because that's where people tend to be the least critical. And if you are trying not to find love, do so sometime Wednesday night, Wednesday evening, because that's where people are the most picky. And by the way, all of these charts that I've shown, it is not small amounts of data. We have about 250 million swipes to predict these things on. So this tends to be very human behavior, that we are sort of very warm, if you will, on a late Saturday night, and extremely cold. Maybe I should have used other colors, but extremely cold on a early Wednesday night. But with that, that is sort of all I would love to say. If you have any questions in terms of dating, matchmaking, please shoot them. If you have any comments, I'd love to hear them as well. But otherwise, thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you.
Oh, shoot.
Oh my God, there's a big question. First question, let me have that one. I don't know if we can have the microphone over there. That's perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Ingmar, for showing us some insights from your company. It's very interesting how you construct algorithms. In terms of ethical considerations, Can you try to describe how did you consider bias and those ethical concerns when you are, you mentioned yourself you had some issues or maybe some considerations about popularity and so on, and there might be other reasons, other parts of the algorithm that you actually had a lot of discussion in your team about it, because I think that's some of the very interesting things happening these days, because you showed a lot of quantitative data, but what about the qualitative data as well? I'm just curious to know how your considerations are. So,
it's a very good question. So firstly, I would say we are not put in the world as a company to sort of dictate for people what they should do, right? So, and I guess this goes for all companies that are working with any degree of math and algos, is that we are, to a large extent, being dictated by the data itself. And what we would claim as, say, our ethical ground is that what we are seeing on the app is essentially human behavior. If I see a profile in front of me and I like it, that we trust is the user's own choice and their own, essentially, will to send that like into the system. And what we are then doing as a feedback mechanism is saying, okay, if you like this person, well, you are likely, that's an annoying word, you are probable to also like this other person. And then that is sort of how we are then essentially ranking which profiles we see and how we are, say, ethically deciding. But you have a very good point, which is essentially when you rank users based on popularity, well, some users will naturally show up as unpopular. But we would argue as a sort of matchmaking entity that is essentially a good thing. Because on the other side of the equation, there'll also be another person who's likely to be less popular and who's then likely to give you that like that you get so few of. And so ranking users based on popularity makes it actually easier for us to give everyone a like or a match instead of, say, pure randomness. If we were to use pure randomness and sort of showing users each other, well, then the least popular person would never get a match. Because most people who see the least popular person do not like them. And so this person will never get a match. Whereas when we do a bit of ranking in sort of the engine room of things, we can show, and as I showed you on one of the charts, the least popular people also once sending the most likes into the system. So if we can show a somewhat unpopular person to another somewhat unpopular person, there's a much higher chance of both of them getting a match and thereby getting a good experience. And if this sounds sort of ethically wrong, we sort of understand that. But the alternative is that no one gets matches on the platform, and that is why people even come in the first place. So I hope I somehow got to answer your question, even though it might have been a bit. Otherwise, please follow up if there's any.
Yes, I think it was a very good answer. Thank you. Another thing that struck me is that do you ever also include qualitative data in your sort of measuring the effects and considering your next moves?
Yes. So that's a super good question. Yes, we're a very data-driven team. We love data, not just me, but also the other guys on the team. But of course we do. So, and I think the easiest way being that we are quite young and we use our product quite actively ourselves. We get a lot of feedback just from our users, just talking to them and asking them, do you actually enjoy the matches you get? Do you actually end up going out on a date with the people you match with? Do you like the people you see on the app? And then we use that, of course, as a feedback also in terms of how do we then weight the parameters in this underlying, very secret, very evil algo that we have running on the back end of things. So of course we do, and we constantly do that. I think any good tech company that's trying to achieve anything will need or will have to always take feedback from their users, even when they grow to very, very large numbers of users. Because otherwise they'll just lose touch and they'll become irrelevant. And I think that's what we see with some large companies that young people are sort of turning their backs to.
Was that it? Yeah, we have another question from the gentleman.
Yeah, I was just wondering, have the dating industry considered how AI is going to influence that world, and have you discussed it in your company as well?
Yeah, so I wanted to bring a slide on it, and then I decided not to, because I want to keep this very data-driven. So and this is perhaps my personal opinion more than the company's, but if AI starts to become, say, the main driver in dating apps, I would argue that our industry has made itself obsolete. Right? So some of the use cases that we see out there is that you sort of essentially can put a chatbot in your own dating profile, so that you don't have to respond to the people who text you. The profile would do it for you. But if you then think the next logical step is that that person writing you also has a chatbot, right? And so we just have two chatbots texting each other instead of two people. And then why on earth even have a dating app? You could essentially just upload your calendar to a whatever online entity, and then that would just give you a date sometime, and say you show up at this point, at sort of this bar on this day, and go out on a date, because you don't need to chat with people anymore, because the AI has sort of done it for you. What I will say is, though, AI in some broader sense, as machine learning algorithms and stuff like that, of course we're using that in the matchmaking mechanism. But in terms of, say, chatting and replacing human interaction and sort of authentic behavior, we're at least a bit wary of it, because in essence it becomes irrelevant to then have a dating app. Does that make sense? Cool.
Cool. Well, I think, oh, there's one more. The gentleman.
Just a quick question. How do you handle users that has no single friends?
Mechanically, it doesn't work in our app. So if you sign up without a friend, you cannot get a match. You can sort of swipe on people, they can swipe back on you, but you cannot match with them until there's a friend on there. I think we have a dream of trying to make this work somehow, but we're not there yet. So as a sort of purely mechanical thing right now with our app, you will need to have single friends on the app, yeah. But you can always add me if you want to, so I'm on there.
That's good.
Yes, of course.
Right,
of course.
right,
they always are. They always are.
That's a good story. Well, thank you for all your questions. That were fantastic. And thank you, Ingmar, for sharing your story about your dating app. That was very inspirational.